idolater. But what's the deal going on here? Idolatry was practiced by all the foreign wives and concubines from the other nations, and because the household was his responsibility ultimately, he was not just the king of the nation, but the Balabayit, the Balabas. And because it went on his watch, so to speak, it's as if he participated himself. Wonderful Medrash. Oh, how we clean up this dynasty. But look in the text. Solomon worships idols. So there are various discrepancies in here, various warnings about the wrong way to go, and the story is connected to the Deuteronomic Code specifically to show what happens if you violate it. Joshua is an origin myth or a creation myth, not really, but in this context to say, how did we come to be on this land and hold this land? And it supports the information given to us already in the Torah that these Canaanites are a foreign and different people, and that we come from another place, and we are chosen to have and hold this land. And we have stories in the Torah already of the patriarchs, and they're staking out the land. But we never deny that there are aboriginal occupants. The morality and biblical times didn't really call for this justification. It was okay to conquer and settle. And there are references in the Torah where it says, Achori azaya ba'aretz. Who are the Chori? The Chori are the Hurrians. The Hurrians had a great ancient empire and civilization that was eclipsed by the Hittites and the Egyptians. When we launch already in the biblical era of 3,000 years ago, there aren't any anymore. But there is still a collective memory of their having been there, and the Torah still records that before Seir, before the Edomites settled Seir and the hills and all of that, that the Chori were there once, and that this land was taken from them. And it was okay just to occupy land by conquest, so our origin myths for how we got there don't bother about that. Now, we all know the new evidence. Well, if we don't, we're going to hear it again. For those of you who haven't heard it, I'm going to kill Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny now for you. All the archaeological evidence seems to tell us that Israelite and Canaanite are shoots of the same root. We're the same people. We've known for decades now that we speak the same language. The lettering in Canaanite is different, but if you phonetically change Canaanite to modern Hebrew, to modern Hebrew lettering, it's almost modern Hebrew. It's even more contemporary in some places than the Tanakh is. In a sense, it's more developed and closer to the modern, very close to modern Hebrew. That's Canaanite. It's okay. These are the Phoenicians. These are the Carthaginians. These are people who cradled civilization more in some ways than Mesopotamia or Egypt. It's okay to be associated with them. It's a fine pedigree. Now, why is it that we deny this? The Canaanites are a Hamitic people. We're a Semitic people. We give two different sons of Noah for our origins. Why do we want to disassociate ourselves with them? And what is the great division? Obviously, at some point, there is a theological, a religious division. They remain idolaters throughout their history, into the new manifestation as Carthaginians in the classical world. So in the ancient world, they were certainly idolaters. But what is it that separated us so and divided us so much? The best we can say while reading the text, combined with the archaeological evidence, is the Canaanites were the city folk and we were the country folk. They lived down on the cities on the coast and the coastal plain. We lived up in the hills. They cultivated the fields, and ultimately, as the Phoenicians went out sailing and trading as merchants, we tended flocks in those hills. Look at the text, at our Bible overall. It likes the shepherd. It favors the shepherd over the city man and the farmer. Who are the great shepherds? Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and David. The king, in a very late manifestation, when we'd already exiled these people, occupied their cities, we were taking up their crafts, David is still a shepherd. In this time of David, 2,800 to 3,000. It's 3,000 by our traditional reckoning. It's probably only 2,800 years back that we're looking at the actual personality of David. This was a time of great transition technologically that Tanakh lets us in on. In 1 Samuel, it tells us that the great disadvantage that Saul has in fighting the Philistines is the Philistines have barzel, a new word, iron. And there is not sword nor spear to be found amongst the Israelites. The iron technology wasn't so much that you had a better weapon. Iron isn't necessarily better than bronze. It's more plentiful and it's cheaper. Bronze requires copper and tin. They are not usually found in the same places, so you have to gather them. And they're much less abundant than iron. The deal with iron is that iron requires a very high temperature to smelt it, a higher temperature than either tin or copper to make bronze. The way that you make a furnace give off this high temperature is with bellows, where you force air into the furnace, increasing the heat sufficiently to work iron. But you have to know to force this air in and to do it, and this was the splitting of the atom 3,000 years ago. That's what it is comparable to. That is the secret. The Hittites on the Anatolian Plateau, what is modern-day Turkey, held this secret for centuries and didn't let it out. With the collapse of their empire, it was disseminated very widely. And
how could they have held on to this technology for so long without somebody seeing it and understanding it and knowing it? And running
there is in the Eastern world, actually it's in the Western world also, the smith, the metalsmith, has always had a mystique and has always been in something of a closed guild.
But anybody could see what the smith was doing, how he made horseshoes, and how he worked his furnace.
I don't think that was really something that would have been visible to the public at that time. They would have kept it only to the smith, his apprentices, his journeymen, and his servants, and no one else would see it. The nearest contemporary record we might have of such a thing is the making of Japanese swords. That there are still master smiths today that with all our machinery and technology, we cannot duplicate the work that they do. They keep their work very secret. There is even a story that there is a way that you lower the heated blade into water, and how you cool it will determine how hard or brittle or what the temperament of the blade will be. And there was a guest smith that supposedly was trying to dip his finger into the water just to find out what temperature the water is, this part of the secret, and got his hand cut off for his troubles. So we might imagine that for the Hittites it was a similar secret. You have to know that it did leak out. It leaked out. It flooded out when the Hittite Empire collapsed, about 1,200 years before the Common Era to about 800 years before the Common Era is an iron flood. When that empire breaks up into little kingdoms, the smiths are displaced, it seems. And with their displacement, it's like nuclear scientists, becoming refugees. So the countries or the localities that can scoop up these nuclear scientists will now gain parity. And we are seeing in the Bible the rise to parity. Saul is lacking in iron. David has it. David has the iron. David gets the iron sort of roundabout, it seems. David gets the iron from the Plishtim, the Philistines. They're an interesting people, the Philistines. They are probably most readily identified with the Egyptian inscriptions of a people called the Peleshet. The Peleshet were part of an amalgam of peoples known as the Sea peoples. They were migrating and wandering around the eastern Mediterranean during these centuries, raiding here, settling there, hiring themselves out as mercenaries sometimes. Sometimes they raided the delta, sometimes Pharaoh employed them. They were settled in the area of Gaza and in the Negev area in Gaza by the Egyptians. The Egyptian empire had receded at this point, and as many empires have done throughout history, if they have a good amount of cash or other supplies, but they don't have the manpower and the military resources, they will hire barbarian peoples to man the borders as buffers against other barbarian peoples. And so it seems that the Peleshet, the Philistines, were stationed there as a guardian against Israelite and Habiru incursions coming from the north. We were a wild bunch. We were a ferocious band. You can see this in our own text description of ourselves, our self-image. You can see this in the descriptions of other peoples about us. The recording of what was going on at the time in the books of Joshua and Judges reflects this time when we had not yet coalesced into a definable nation and did not yet have a monarchy. We see tentative steps towards the monarchy being taken throughout the book of Judges. They want someone to be a king, Gidon. Gidon won't take it. He is the Cincinnatus of the Israelites. He goes back to his farm and he's done with leading. So you have the citizen leader. There is an interesting thing in history that we have to understand.